untouchable, yeah, she's unstoppable. Tick, 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 hearts on split, split, split. Watch her move, boy, she's your meltdown hit. She walks in like a savior draped in radioactive silk. Promises the future, but her balance.
Hello everybody, welcome back. Always takes me a minute. Give me a moment.
Strike the ground, they call it innovation, but every move she makes is pure detonation. Tick, tick, watch her light the fuse. Her lips are like ignition.
Alrighty, here we go. Hope you're having a great day. Great weekend. We're up and running. It's a song by James Lucid known as Meltdown Queen. Video is fantastic. The audio does it justice, but the video helps a little bit better on top of it. Here we go. We're going back into the time machine. The time machine. I'm Dana. You can call in at 709-589-4406. All lines are currently open. We gained a total of 2 subscribers this month in the last 28 days. We're killing it over here. Apparently that's such a threat that Italy's Facebook took down my Facebook in Italian. I couldn't believe what I was looking at. I didn't have anything Italian on my Facebook. We disable your account, review your account, and determine it will still violate our community standards for account integrity. Apparently Italy, now this was, I got to notice a week before they announced, 21 days ago, a week before they had announced that they were going to go nuclear again. And as you know, some of you, I'm sure, in 86, after Chernobyl, the country had a referendum and voted out the nuclear power. After Fukushima, they had another referendum and they still voted out nuclear power. And today, there's 81% of the population says no to nuclear. So they're not going to have a referendum. They're just going to go ahead and do nuclear and get rid of any perceived threats to the industry like me. And you can't request another review of the decision. Why was the Spanish, the Italy, coming after me? They don't even speak English, right? I don't know what's up with that, but my Facebook is gone. I've worked really hard on that. It's quite a blow. I won't be forgetting them. I can assure you that much. In fact, there's a show coming up dedicated to Italy. A new, so this is March 13, 2011. We got a poll tonight, by the way. Let me flash over to that. Has Fukushima's brutal radioactive fallout compromised the future of humans and all species worldwide? And the reason that poll is framed that way is because we have an extinction event playing out. And we have 6 years of research expeditions punched in to quantify those assertions, by the way. New blast rocks Japanese nuclear plant. We're talking about actual 4 to 5 months of field studies doing species counts. From Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska in particular, and now in the Atlantic Ocean. And the findings are quite stunning. March 13, 2011, nuclear blast rocks Japanese nuclear power plants. It's not a blast, I suppose, is one way to put it. This was a detonation, an explosion. These were huge buildings. Right here is 190 feet with my fingers to. It ejected, this is reactor 3, which was a plutonium mixed oxide reactor. That's the actual reactor core and the fuel pools ejected right into the building. We've never seen anything like this in history. Never heard of anything like this pre-Fukushima. And then there was 3 more reactors confirmed that had melted down and detonated and lost their inventories. At the top of each of the buildings were around 8 reactor cores that are stored in 2 fuel pools. They boil off enormous amount of radiation every day into the environment, because the fuel, even though it's out of the reactor, is still splitting atoms for 1 million homes and businesses. So those atoms with no containment are now targeting you, your friends, your families, your loved ones, and all the species worldwide. And it's time to stop dragging your knuckles and get after this industry, okay? I'm not getting any younger, any more handsome. A screen grab taken from the news footage by the Japanese public broadcaster in each case shows the moment of a hydrogen explosion, the number 3 reactor on that Monday, the 13th. The hydrogen explosion is caused by the actual nuclear meltdown. The meltdown creates the gas. So every time you hear the word hydrogen, there has to be a reason that the hydrogen existed. It existed because of the nuclear meltdown produces the hydrogen plus all the other isotopes. And the hydrogen is produced by the zirconium cladding catching fire. It burns at 1800 degrees. And inside of the cladding, which is the fuel rods or the fuel pellets, the uranium plutonium, they'll burn at 9,000 Fahrenheit degree temperatures. This will evaporate the water in the pool. Once the rods are exposed, they all catch fire at one time. Hence the reason you see such a catastrophic explosion. Ejecting the fuel pools and the reactor cores right out of the building. That's really quite something. A little disturbed that they took down my Facebook site. I didn't listen. I'm a very honest person, okay, and I like to provide documentation for everything I say, just so nobody can misconstrue what I'm saying, because it's an educational program. I'm not your typical blogger / YouTuber / whatever. I run an educational program. It's a lot of responsibilities. It's a tough gig. Trust me, it's a tough gig. There's nothing easy about the things I'm doing. And then when you put in the research expeditions, I'm constantly sick to my guts because I can't fulfill obligations to the species that I should be able to fulfill because of the nuclear industry's censorship of me. And the species have no one to stand up to them, one of you and me. And there's not many of you, unfortunately. So this is the remainder of Reactor 3. So with this, the reactor core and the fuel pools were at the top of this building. This building was supposed to be 190 feet, 65 meters, 19 stories. It's a pretty big building, right? What you see left is just, this should have been gutted all the way to the ground, but they used that to put a cover over it and claim that the fuel pool still existed. The fuel pool was about 140 feet above the top of the stump. A hydrogen explosion at the Unit 3. This was the plutonium mixed oxide reactor. So we're very fortunate that we have these headlines, by the way, and we're very fortunate that we have hindsight. And we're very fortunate that we documented methodically, meticulously, all the information is archived, so that we can tell the story appropriately, properly, and factually. And there's no need to exaggerate. How do you exaggerate something like that? It's all gone. How do you exaggerate the explosion when it ejects the reactor core and the fuel pools right into the building? What more could you possibly exaggerate, see? And why would you? It's an educational program. What I think is stunning, and I'm gonna convey tonight, is the perpetual lies from universities, academics, nuclear scientists, pro-nuclear corporations, pro-nuclear media, which is all the media, that started immediately on day one and never stopped even today. The most dangerous lies ever told in history, by the way. And they they clawed over each other to be the one to tell the lies, which is what I found really terrifying. Similar to an earlier blast at a different unit of the facility, Chief Cabinet Secretary O'Donnell, who should be waterboarded a couple of thousand times, should have a full medical team stood up there to revive him when they drown him and then waterboard him till he drowns again. What he done is unconscionable and has now compromised all the species on top of that. He played a significant part. Dono, the monster, said people within a 12-mile radius were ordered inside following the explosion. Going in your house is not a solution to radioactive fallout. It's the opposite of a solution. It's the worst thing you can do. But if they had ordered them and evacuated right away, like they could have, then you wouldn't have 865,000 extra cancers in the first year. And cancer is not the only illness or disease or autoimmune deficiency or injury or illness. Associate Press journalists feel the blast 30 miles away. So they felt this blast 30 miles away, which also helps appreciate, and let me show you another picture to help articulate what was in the blast. So the reactor core is at the top of the buildings, and there's 2 fuel pools. Each fuel pool has 4 decades of reactor cores stuffed into them because they don't have a repository. This was some of the original footage to your left. In the first, I'm not sure exactly when that picture was taken, the first month or so. And there's not an academic on the planet that looked at that and didn't know the fuel pool's reactor cores were gone. And they have remained silent ever since. Now, there are academics and scientists who originally spoke out, but they didn't tell you the fuel pools were gone. And how do we move past that fact? Well, you don't. You have to hold them accountable. The monster Idano said that the reactor's inner containment vessel was holding nuclear rods was intact. Clearly, that's not true when it actually was ejected right out of the building, the fuel pool and the reactor core. Now, they were aware that Idano was 100% aware that, so was every academic on the planet. As we start rolling through this stuff here tonight, you got to appreciate this is an extinction event. This was a pulse event. The Unit 3 reactor had been under emergency watch for a possible explosion as pressure built up there following a hydrogen blast. The hydrogen blast, of course, is the meltdown. It's really something like these laws. I was really shocked today. Just hours after Monday's explosion, Tokyo Electric Power Company said a third reactor, this one at Fukushima Unit 2, had lost its cooling capacity and could lead to overheating and an explosion similar to the previous 2 blasts. So what happens to a nuclear reactor and the fuel pools is the fuel pools, not only do they need a significant amount of Pacific type of water, they need circulation. And if you lose circulation for a few hours, then you're going to have the process of melting down is going to start. And it's going to take an incredible effort to stop that from happening. And because you had 1,200 miles of the coastline inundated with a massive tsunami, lost all the power, external powers. All nuclear power plants run on external power. They're dependent upon 2 gas, oil, coal, or very large gas, oil, coal power plants. In fact, if you took these 2 power plants combined, you're putting out more power than a nuclear plant does. Nuclear plant is about the fuel cycle. And Japan sends a lot of its fuel to the United Kingdom and France to make weapons for United States or UK and France. And then they also take back some of the waste in the form of plutonium mixed oxide fuel, which shouldn't exist. An explosion similar to the previous 2 blasts was Reactor 1 and Reactor 3. Now remember, running on day 2. Well, day 3 if you count the March 11th tsunami day itself. So day 3. Not the entire day, but day 3. including a release of pressure through the ventilation if the reactor overheats. But the problem with the story was, once that happened, you ejected decades of reactor cores and fuel rods all over the site. There is nobody can go in there, and there's no power. The reactors need 1 million gallons each a minute. That's 4,500 tons. Think of 4,500 one-ton pickup trucks driving past your front door. Now, you got to cross the street to get in your car to go to work. And you like to leave work 15 minutes before work. You just live down the road from work. And so every morning you come out of your house and there's 4,500 trucks driving past your house every minute. Each minute. 4,500 one-ton pickup trucks of water for a reactor each minute has to drive past your house and dump. My apologies. And dump a ton of water each, 4,500 tons, 1 million gallons a minute. Now think about the story where they said that they lost power throughout that whole part of the country for 1,200 miles because the telephone poles were all torn out. But they used batteries to keep the reactors cool. This simply wasn't true. How many batteries does it take for each reactor? So you got 4 reactors times 4,500 one-ton pickup trucks each minute. 1,440 minutes a day each minute. So 4 million gallons. How many batteries do you need to pump 4 million gallons a minute? Or 18,000 tons a minute. So it's not a very plausible story, right? But that was their official story. Oh, we had batteries. Thank goodness for batteries. The Unit 3 reactor has been under emergency watch for possible explosions. Pressure built up there following a hydrogen blast Saturday in the facility's Unit 1. Well, on that same day, Reactor 3 blew up, right? Plant workers were preparing, so by the time they wrote the story, they were aware of this. Plant workers were preparing to inject seawater to cool down the reactor. Once Reactor 1, which is right alongside of Reactor 2, which is right alongside of Reactor 3, Reactor 1 explosion, which meant that was the fuel pool detonated. On top of that, ejected reactor cores all over the site. We actually have a forest fire now in Iwate, which is right alongside of the nuclear meltdowns. And it's around 1,800 acres that have burnt many communities. And these people are probably better off, unfortunately, for that to happen because they refuse to leave that nuclear wasteland. And so we can expect a big plume of radioactive fallout, a continuous plume for the next couple of weeks from this event, because it takes quite a long time for it to finish finding its way to North America. And I suspect the Geiger counter up there will climb over the next, in about 2 days to 3 days, we'll see that start to climb. Including a release of pressure through ventilation. First off, there's no way to release the pressure. You can't put water in the reactor because they're pressurized at almost 1,000 pounds per square inch. So imagine a balloon at 1,000 pounds per square inch, and you're going to try to pour water inside of it. How do you think that's going to work? Imagine going out and you got somebody with a screwdriver going to press in on the valve on your tire. And when they're pressing in, you're going to take boiling hot water, and you're going to lean right up by it, and then you're going to pour the boiling hot water, into your tire. Do you think that's going to work for you very good? Would you try it? You won't, right? Because the tire is going to blow all that boiling hot water in your face, right? Well, imagine if your tire, instead of being at 30 pounds per square inch, is 1,000 pounds per square inch. Do you really think they were adding water to these reactors at 1,000 pounds per square inch? I can assure you they didn't. And you can't vent it because you have a detonation happened and you had the entire country was ripped apart. Did I mention they had a tsunami? Do you know what a tsunami does to a community and infrastructure? How do you think you're going to find anywhere there to plug in your phone? You're talking about 1,200 kilometers, 1,200 miles of coastline. The Onagawa nuclear power plant also had found a lot of radiation higher than acceptable levels. Apparently that was from Fukushima, they're claiming. The degenerate International Atomic Energy Agency now reports the levels have returned to normal. How can you return to normal when you have reactors detonating and ongoing chain reactions, criticalities and chain reactions? It simply didn't work that way. The radiation doesn't turn to fairy dust. It's not like it's snowing and then it stops snowing, okay? It's radiation. It's going to pulse energy almost at the speed of light every second per atom. An investigation indicates no emissions of radioactivity have occurred from any of the 3 units at the Onagawa. Well, the fuel pools are always hemorrhaging radiation in every community worldwide. There's over 1,000 fuel pools that are your mortal enemy and the enemy of every species on this planet, are splitting atoms into your environment every second. There is no containment on the fuel pools. The fuel is in the deep water because of splitting atoms. The atoms boil the water. There's 120,000 liters a day. And you need to come up with a solution for this. You need to stop this so that we can have some kind of a future on this planet and maybe some insects. Without insects, none of us are going to exist. The transient, or want to exist, the transient increase in radioactive levels may have been due to radioactive material released by Fukushima, also known as the Daiichi nuclear plant, 60 miles to the south, Onagawa, along Japan's eastern coast. Just up right here. And remember, NAMI, 14 years later, 81% of it is still a nuclear wasteland. No-go zone. And here's the International Atomic Energy Agency. Shows up, cut your throat right away. Cut your throat. Cut. It's absurd. The whole story is absurd. It's absurd to suggest that the International Atomic Energy Agency has a single good human involved there. It's absurd to suggest it. It's absurd to suggest that every one of them should get the death penalty for what they've done and continue to do. That's the stump of reactor 4, the ghost of reactor 4 to your left. The reactor core and the fuel pools were ejected out of the buildings. You can actually see the bottom top part of a reactor core in this particular one. This building in particular, Unit 4, was going through a fuel change. So the reactor should be up here somewhere where my fingers to. Instead, it's right here. This is the bottom part, and that's the cover that goes over it. Now, this would have had 3/4 of the fuel still in it. They're really something, eh? So what you're seeing here is the media pretending they're in the fuel pool at the top of the building to your left. All of it created by the International Atomic Energy Agency to lull you into complacency so you can't fight for your life, your friends, your families, your loved ones, your children, and the species that depend upon you. They're 100% vulnerable to this industry. There's nothing on the planet with an autoimmune trigger to defend against this industry. And investigations indicate no emissions of radioactivity have occurred from any of the 3 units. Well, ain't that pretty? An explosion started at the Daiichi plant prompted the evacuation of 200,000 people living within 12 miles of the complex. They are not going to evacuate anybody for something to do or because they're good people. They're doing it because they don't want a lot of dead bodies in the houses they can't explain. And there was over 3,000 people died of the evacuees in the next few weeks. And they died from radiation poisoning. The disgusting industry tried to blame it on stress. And we've seen over 10 million people at a time post-Fukushima evacuating from supercell cyclones, supercell typhoons, supercell hurricanes we've never seen before until after this catastrophic event killed off the bases of the food chain, the bases of the oxygen chain, the bases of the carbon sequestering chain. Reports said that the radioactive iodine and cesium were released. Well, the biggest byproduct of the radiative fuel rod is a curium isotope. That's hence the word curium for the meltdown. And curium isotopes, you need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium. Now, I'm not saying that iodine and cesium are not an issue. They certainly are, and there certainly was a lot of it. It was 10 million atoms of cesium-137 per cubic meter of air. It was a French study in Canada, United States, certainly the world. But Canada, United States was immediately annihilated, the species. And this caused, now the iodine, we've seen multiple studies of iodine-131 at 20 million atoms per liter, or 20 million actual particles, even worse, per liter. That's more than 20 million pulses of energy every second in the rainfall. And cesium-137 was 10 million atoms per cubic meter of air. In a French study, cesium pulses energy 600 feet every second, so there's no problem wrecking your DNA, your chromosomes, your organs. Reports of some radioactive iodine cesium, so there was the full range. It would have been 1,000 different isotopes in the plumes. The industry is so completely out of control for so long, it refuses to be human now. It's gotten away with so much for so long, it's literally turned into a psychopath monster on its own. And you can't exist in the nuclear industry without being a monster. And it's really stunning how disrespectful this industry is to everything on the planet. It literally has to exterminate everything on the planet to survive. At this stage now, it's well on its way to fulfilling its prophecy of exterminating all the species. All it's good at is destroying the species, the DNA, the chromosomes, the fertility of the species. This was a Neptunium-239 dispersal based on 20 days. There's so many studies of so much radioactivity. You can live in denial all you want, but I can't. If you hang around here, you won't. In an effort to prevent a meltdown, of course, the detonations were documentation. They show it to you, right? They actually show you the detonation of Unit 3. But they're claiming that didn't happen until some other day, apparently, because the way they framed the narrative in the story was as if that didn't happen, but yet they show you that picture. That's the plutonium mixed oxide reactor going kapooey, which is a catastrophic event on its own to every species on the planet. My goodness, when are we gonna get up and make a stand? What are you waiting for? Engineers have flooded this reactor, Unit 1, with seawater after its cooling system failed. Yeah, then it blew up. Once it blew, of course, you can't flood it with water seawater, because it's 1,000 pounds per square inch. You can't open it up. It has to be opened up underwater on top of that, right? You have no power to do any of this kind of things. You can't flood it in through circumvented valves, because you're talking about 1,000 pounds per square inch. Try pouring boiling water into your tire while you're deflating it and see how that works. And that's only 30 pounds per square inch. They simply didn't do this, right? They couldn't go near it. Engineers have flooded this reactor. That wasn't true. On top of that, it needs 1 million gallons per minute. Like, they had no power. So the fuel pools had no power. The water wasn't circulating. The reactor had no power. The water wasn't cooling down. They couldn't vent it. That's why it detonated. Engineers have had to vent radioactive vapor to relieve the high pressure and avoid an explosion, like the one that struck the complex on Saturday. Of course, it's simply not true. You can't vent it after the tsunami took out all the power. You had no power. There was no generators. This is not up for debate. There was no generators, okay? They had no power. It's 100% lie. The whole thing is constructed clearly by some very intelligent people, very knowledgeable people in the nuclear industry. And the only people that seems to fit the criteria, as far as I can tell, is the International Atomic Energy Agency. They're the architects of the laws. The government set radiation levels around the plant Fukushima Daiichi were not harmful. Oh, wait, now you got this picture here, which is a screen grab taken from news footage. This is the plutonium mixed oxide reactor, and fuel pools starting to fall back down onto the site. You are not going there and doing anything. These are lethal doses everywhere. And the only people that can possibly do anything at the other reactors were nuclear experts, and there's zero possibility after they see that you're going to get them to go near that site. So to suggest that the radiation levels around Daiichi were not harmful is criminal. And they should be held accountable. It's never too late to hold them accountable for genocide. This is a genocide and an omnicide that we're looking at. And that amounts emanating from the plant appears to have decreased after the blast. So if the blast was multi-million sieverts per cubic meter, and then it gets down to millions of sieverts per cubic meter, then it decreased. But does that mean it was safe? Does that mean a human can survive in that environment? No. And to frame the narrative that way, clearly this is the works of the International Atomic Energy Agency, which is disgusting and despicable and reprehensible and criminal. It's 100% criminal what they've done. Which produced an intensifying cloud of white smoke that swallowed the complex. This is not white smoke we're talking about. This is a lethal radioactive plume that will drop you like a sniper round if you get into it. It's instantaneous because we're talking about so much. It melts your organs as you stood there in seconds. There's no way to survive it. This is an industry of worthless scum. There is nothing good in the nuclear industry. Zero. Zilch. The nuclear industry has never produced a single human with the human attributes. Once they join that industry, they turn in literally and figuratively into monsters. Sadistic, annihilating monsters. Radiation so far is on site, really. But it's of great concern. NPR's Christopher Joyce reported. And a journalist's job is to cut your throat too, not just UN. A journalist seems to take great pleasure in cutting our throats. I've never dreamt for a second that when I was young that there could be this much evil on the planet. How could you conceive that a journalist hates your guts and is doing everything they can to destroy your future and make sure you can't have one and disarm you from taking precautions? Shouldn't people like that get the death penalty? And shouldn't it be public too, very public, the execution for what they've done? So let's start this again. We're going to stop this on day 13. There it is, day 13. Let me go back a little knob. So that model is covering all that's like all the way from Tokyo all the way up to Okinawa. I'm sorry, all the way up to the Northern Islands. So let me keep playing this for about 16 days. So this is 16 days in. Look at the plume. This is the French's model, and it's saying 1 million, 10 million atoms of cesium-137, which is catastrophic, but not the worst isotope by no means, but certainly catastrophic for hundreds of years, right? I mean, when I'm reading this stuff, it's just, I'm glad I don't do the show as I'm gathering this stuff up, because maybe I should. In towns near the reactor, residents are lining up to be tested for radiation exposure. They visit a testing facility, Koriyama City. Now, we know all these years later that Koriyama City, every house, every building there is entitled to be decontaminated, but they don't have enough homeless people apparently to do it. And that the school was using boxes with bottles of water in it to shield the students, the kindergarten, the grade 1, 2, 3, 4 students from the outdoor radiation. So they were under the belief that radiation was pulsing energy and that there was nothing in the school or there was no airborne radiation. They're still there today. 300,000 people in a nuclear wasteland where there's over 300,000 atoms of cesium-137 per square meter on the ground. It's a 100% nuclear wasteland. This is simply not, under any circumstances, acceptable. Authorities were planning to distribute iodine to residents in the area, according to the degenerate International Atomic Energy Agency, who claimed that it counteracts the effects of radiation. This is one of the most ludicrous assertions conceivable. NPR's Christopher Joyce, John Hamilton, Rob Gifford, and reporter Spooky contributed to the report. So that's 4 journalists that done everything they could to cut your throats and destroy your future and the future of the planet, right there. How can you have nothing but contempt for these degenerate monsters? These cowards and traitors to humanity and the 8 million species. How does that actually work? How can you sit and pretend that they have any redeeming qualities? By the way, iodine don't counteract the effects of radiation. Allegedly, if you take it early enough, it might fill up your thyroid gland, but the radiation is still coming in your body. It's still going to sequester in your muscles, your organs, and your bones. It's still going to attack your thyroid. It's still going to be attacked by cesiums and other gammas. It's not just iodine-131 that goes into your thyroid. It's any gamma, and there's many. Japan's nuclear crisis is uncharted territory. This is the 14th. This is day 4. Japan's rush to avert a nuclear meltdown. This is day 4. Did I mention that? We had 3 meltdowns already happen on day 4. And on day 5, the 4th one happened. Amid growing fears of further reactor malfunctions. If any of these people were in front of me when I'm reading that, I'm most likely going to tear their head right off their shoulders in front of you. After a second explosion rocked the site and the 3rd reactor's cooling functions reportedly stopped. They all stopped with the earthquake. And they all stopped permanently when the tsunami struck an hour later, right? It's an incredible lie. It's a dangerous, unforgivable, criminal lie that they told her that compromises the future of humanity. Bear with me. And the 3rd reactor's cooling function reportedly stopped. I would love to be in a debate with any of these people. It's not going to go good for them, I can tell you that much. And so I wanted to watch that video, of course. That's gone. Japan's Tokyo Electric Power Company, TEPCO, is saying it was preparing to flood the number 2 reactor with seawater. How are you going to flood something that's 1,000 pounds per square inch pressure? That's probably at 2,000 pounds per pressure because everything's boiling and got no way to cool it down. How does that work, I wonder? After similar efforts for the number 1, number 3 unit at Fukushima Daiichi site, this never happened. Once reactor 1, by the way, exploded, the fuel pools at the top of the buildings, that plume meant you couldn't go to the site. You couldn't go anywhere on the site and do something. And they even show you the picture, right, that there is no power in that country. After an explosion number 1 reactor over the weekend, TEPCO announced another explosion on Monday at the number 3 reactor building on the 13th. You know, the Medusa. But the blast was not thought to have blown the main reactor vessel. Why wouldn't you think that? Here's the explosion to your right. It's not thought to have blown it, it blew it. They knew that. And so when he wrote that sentence, that was the lowest form of life conceivable that would write something like that. In fact, I believe none of the journalists named in any of these wrote the articles. They got paid to put their name to it. All of these articles, as far as I can see, were written by somebody who was really deeply involved in the nuclear industry. And we know that the public relation firm known as the International Atomic Energy Agency, Japan is the third biggest donor to, by the way, was writing these stories. Or the World Nuclear Association, which is a nuclear lobbying for the nuclear industry worldwide. Emergency crews risk their lives to prevent the meltdown. Well, what are you talking about? You couldn't prevent the meltdown. You just acknowledged you had multiple nuclear meltdowns. In fact, you even show pictures of the detonations. If they fail, the containers that house the cores could melt or even explode. Yet they show you the picture in the story of the explosion. It could explode, though. Yeah, but why do you show me that picture and saying it could explode? Because brainwashing is a real funny thing, isn't it? Releasing radioactive material into the atmosphere. So if it explodes, it's going to release radioactive material into the atmosphere, like reactor 1 clearly done, reactor 3 clearly done, is what you're saying? How can you not hate these scumbags? How can you have nothing but contempt for these degenerate monsters? These cowards. These are cowards on top of that. And they're the worst cowards because of what they're doing. Let me show you those explosions again. Here's two of them. Reactor 1 to your left and reactor 3, which is on Monday, March the 13th. And March the 12th, just bear with me here. March the 14th for that picture. It was actually March the 13th according to the media though. And I mean, they're showing us pictures. So it has to be the 13th, right? Plutonium has a lower melting point and has a longer lived isotope, White told France 24, which is the French government media. It is worrying this reactor should go. What do you mean should go? Clearly that's gone. You're showing us a picture of the reactor blew up and you're saying it might melt down. A large-scale radiation leakage is unlikely from the failing nuclear plant's Chief Cabinet Secretary, the monster Yukado Idano, told a news conference on Monday, while Japan's Nuclear Safety Agency said there was no possibility of a Chernobyl-style accident while they're showing you that picture. So they're showing you this picture saying there's no chance of a reactor exploding like Chernobyl. Oh, by the way, this is Fukushima. What kind of monster would do something like that? What kind of hateful, disgusting, parasitic, degenerate, dangerous, lethally dangerous to everything on the planet monster would publish something like that? Yeah, you're right. The International Atomic Energy Agency is one of the many. Cooling with seawater. Nuclear experts said it was probably the first time in the industry's 57-year history that seawater had been used in this way, a sign of how close Japan may be to a major accident. How are you going to put seawater into a building at 1,000 pounds per square inch? How are you going to force water in that pipe? Right, because in order to get water to go in, you got to let pressure out. In order to let pressure out, you got to run away for a long, long time, for decades. You couldn't put water in 1,000 pound per square inch containment. You just simply can't do that. And then they show you these pictures of the detonation and claim it didn't happen in the same story. In an interview with Scientific America, degenerate, disgusting parasite physicist Ken Begeron, piece of shit, said even nuclear catastrophe experts like himself were moving quickly into uncharted territories. He's a disgusting parasite. And we're hoping that for all the barriers to release of radioactivity will not fail. But on the same story, here's all the barriers to the radiation release, ejecting the reactor core and the fuel pools right out of the fucking building. I can barely contain my contempt. Dumping seawater to cool the reactors to prevent a dangerous meltdown was a desperate move. The corrosive seawater may avert large-scale radioactive contamination. Like the building is exploded on the site. You can't get back on the site. This is plutonium X oxide, Medusa on top of that. It's an actual Medusa. If you're on the site and you look at it, you die right there on the spot, in other words. And you don't even need to look, you just got to be close to it. It threw fuel assemblies all over the site immediately. It's absurd. The whole story is absurd, how much radiation is actually on the site. And so to suggest that they're heroically is absurd. Authorities evacuated over 170,000 victims within 20 kilometers of the disease factory and the adjacent Fukushima dining site, which is 10 kilometers south, and began screening the public for potential contamination, according to the scumbags at the World Nuclear Association. First off, you're talking about huge doses on people's clothing and hair, let alone interior, in their bodies and everything else, right? And so that those Geiger counters that they were using, if they encounter a big single dose, you have to send it back to the factory to be recalibrated or to see if it can even ever be used again. So every one of their Geiger counters would have failed within minutes. And that the people that were using them were not experts because they're not going to go in a nuclear wasteland. And the minute they see a high dose, even if they did, they're going to run away, which is the appropriate thing to do. The people in their paper suits, by the way, clearly are not experts or they wouldn't be in the paper suit. Authorities evacuated over 170,000 of the victims. Yeah, into an even worse nuclear wasteland. At this stage, we're far from our worst fears. Radiation releases are quite low. CNIC White said. You have no idea what I would do to the side of his friggin' haircut if I could. A bird's eye view of Japan's Stricken nuclear plant shows vast damage. Stricken! Andrew Prince, March 31st. This is long after the reactors have detonated on top of it. Oh, NPR. Well, that makes sense. It's one of the pictures is showing you reactor 3, calling that stricken. Anything but a nuclear meltdown, and everything but anything suggesting a nuclear meltdown. How can you not have nothing but 100% of contempt for these crazy, hateful creatures, these cowards, these subhuman, they call themselves journalists. Damage to the nuclear reactor and the buildings that house them make for hazardous and radioactive conditions. Forget about the access for journalists. I think we should send every journalist in there. Or just get a helicopter and drop them out of the helicopter down on top of it till you got a stack of bodies 100 feet high. And contain it for a while. That'll contain it. That's all they're really good for. They really aren't good for anything, trust me. Workers can't even get too close for too long. You know, the homeless and the destitute. What are you talking about? Can't get too close for too long. These are nuclear meltdowns. Do you see a bunch of people fucking hanging around that? Like, I can't understand how anybody can think a journalist is a human. I really can't. 4 of the facilities, 6 reactor units have been badly damaged by explosions. Oh, they were damaged by explosions, were they? Does that look like it's damaged? The buildings were actually ejected. The reactor cores and fuel pools were ejected out of the buildings. And they show you the pictures of the destroyed buildings with nothing left, and they say they were damaged. Aerial photographs of the facility taken by a drone on March the 20th, 24th put a new face on the ongoing nuclear crisis. We have the original drone footage was released on the 10th anniversary. I've done a couple of presentations on it. It was 736 pictures. And when you zoom in, everything is pixelated. Reactor 1 gone. Reactor 2 gone. Reactor 3 over there gone. Reactor 4 is the furthest one over. All 4 in a row right there. In your top left-hand corner is the common spent fuel pool. It's on the same street, the same height as right behind Reactor 4. Look at the carnage on the roof of all these buildings. That's still there. That's the drone that they use, apparently. The facilities at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant were designed to withstand strong earthquakes and tsunamis, but not to the strength and size experienced on March the 11th. Yeah. Nuclear energy, an atom too far. You can put 200 million atoms on the head of a needle, you can't see it. So another atom broke the camel's back, so to speak, as a metaphor. The current nuclear disaster in Fukushima, Japan reminds us that nuclear energy is far from being clean. Far from being clean. It's such an insidious element, right? There's nothing on the planet that has an autoimmune trigger to defend against. There's not a single species on this planet has an immune that can fight this. We all fight it the same way. We build a tumor around each and every single atom in your body. And the cancer clusters started after the nuclear testing was well underway back in the 60s and 70s. By the early 70s was an actual epidemic of cancer. What do you think that was coming from? Cardboard, tin cans, pop bottles? Oh no, that's right, nuclear fallout. How will we be able to keep homes and schools warm? You ever heard tell of geothermal? You stupid nobody. On the 26th of April 1986, a major accident struck the Chernobyl nuclear disease factory in Ukraine. Today, 355 farms, this is 2011, March the 13th. Is it March the 13th? March, April. So it's April the 4th. I apologize. 355 farms were still unable to produce. This is less than a month later, 3 weeks later. 355 farms are still unable to export their product, meat and vegetables, to other countries. But those farms are in the United Kingdom, in Wales. Some 1,500 miles away, 3,000 kilometers away from the Chernobyl radioactive pollution. Lasts for a very long time. They actually closed 9,400 farms in Ireland, Scotland, United Kingdom. Did you know that? 3,000 kilometers away. Because, it's like a banana on a potato chip. Walking in sunshine, climbing a mountain, flying on an airplane. Anybody tells you that, you should spit in their face the minute that they say it to you. From decades to hundreds of years after a nuclear accident. From decades to hundreds. Again, this stuff lasts for billions of years. It's just so natural for a journalist to lie to you. A journalist is somebody whose job is to manipulate you, destroy your future, and make sure you don't have a future on this planet for any species. Has been estimated that in Ukraine, not only in Chernobyl, 2.5 million people, including 400,000 children, still suffer from health problems due to the disaster. Kofi Annan in 2000 said it was over 3 million children with permanent disabilities because of Chernobyl. And Chernobyl is like a paper towel compared to Fukushima. And I can guarantee you one thing, Chernobyl is not a paper towel. Chernobyl was brutal. But when you compare it to Fukushima, which is an extinction event for the entire planet, it plays out over a few decades, but we are well under our way. The problem with radiation fallout is heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline. Have you seen an increase in any of these over the last 14 years? How about Alzheimer's and dementia and autism, diabetes and Down syndrome and schizophrenia? Next time you're getting your hair cut, ask your hairdresser. Are they seeing an increase in their clients of dementia and Down syndrome and the victims, nephews and nieces and stuff like that? I'm pretty sure you will. The only thing that can truly be expected is that the unexpected will happen one day, again and again and again. That's the legacy of the nuclear industry. When we think about the dangers of nuclear power, we consider only one aspect, the problem of fallout from the accidents. The biggest problem from nuclear is the fuel pools have no containment. The fuel rods, the reactor cores, and the fuel rods that are in the fuel pools are still splitting the atoms for 1 million homes and businesses, and they're released constantly into your environment. And almost every nuclear power plant is surrounded by farms as far as you can see. This is an elixir of stupid and evil. Right? They purposely built these facilities in prime farmland to poison you and your loved ones, and to weaken you and your loved ones, and to slaughter you and your loved ones with an endless host of diseases. Because your immune system is compromised. You have no defense now against pathogens or viruses, so you're much more vulnerable even to just simple flus. Particularly your young and particularly your elderly who gave you life, who have knowledge, have experience, and have earned the right to live out their life and enjoy their grandchildren. And you've taken that away from them for something that only produces pollution that lives for millions of years and never goes away, and you can't destroy it. How can that be a good idea? Because they have a multi-billion-dollar a year public relation firms to fund them, and they get everything they ever asked for. And one of the big problems with nuclear is 90% of the money for the nuclear waste sites and everything else goes to administration. It's not even used for nuclear waste. The reason they haven't come up with a solution in 80 years for nuclear waste is because 90% of the money is gone into administration, which steals it. You have no idea how vicious and evil and sadistic and monstrous these creatures actually are. You really don't. Radioactive releases in Japan could last months, experts say. Matthew Wall, truly one of the lowest forms of humans ever existed. March the 13th, 2011, we covered him many times 13 years ago, the first couple of years. We covered that disgusting parasite so much, I actually stopped covering him. He's so prolific of a monster. The radioactive releases of steam, this is not steam, this is lethal emissions that looks like steam. From the crippled, from the missing, from the destroyed, from the nuclear meltdowns, could go on for weeks or even months. What a disgusting parasite Matthew Walls. It's so difficult for me sometimes. The emergency flooding of the Stricken reactors with seawater and the resulting steam releases are a desperate step intended to avoid a much bigger problem, the full meltdown of the nuclear cores in the reactors. Again, March the 13th, Reactor 1 and Reactor 3 had already detonated. The beauty of hindsight is you can look at these lawyers, and that in the criminal court we can convict every one of them. It's not a crime to poison you, unfortunately. And that Congress in the United States, for instance, parliaments in the United Kingdom or Australia or Canada don't have the authority to make it illegal to poison you with radioactive emissions from nuclear disease factories known as nuclear power plants. And that the people that have the authority to do it are the non-regulatory commissions, which is typically 5 of them, and they're appointed for every administration. And there's zero possibility they're going to do it because they're the industry's most ruthless monsters. You can't get the job unless you're an absolute ruthless monster that is going to poison everybody everywhere. That's the only way you get those particular jobs for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. But presumably leaking more radiation. The building's actually detonated, ejected the reactor cores into fuel pools. The lies are so numerous. I don't know how they can get away with it outside of just dumb down the entire population of every facet of nuclear. The Simpsons, and Spider-Man, and the Hulk. All of these were co-opted by the industry to lull you into a la-la land when it comes to nuclear. Later Monday, the government said cooling systems at a third reactor had failed. And you know what? If you mention that The Simpsons was used to brainwash people about nuclear to an average person, their response is going to be, I like Simpsons. They're not going to hear anything you said, only Simpsons. A complete dumbing down of the entire planet is 100% almost. And the people that are awake is a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a percent worldwide. The Kyoto News Agency reported that damaged fuel rods at the third reactor had been temporarily exposed. If you expose the reactor rods, what do you mean temporarily exposed? Like you can't put water in these pressurized reactors. It's like pouring water in a balloon, right? It can't be done. But you're talking about 1,000 pounds per square inch in a balloon. How are you going to put water in there? How does that work? Kind of magic trick. There is none, right? So once the fuel rods are exposed, they melt down immediately. Once the air strikes the fuel rod, they ignite. The zirconium cladding that are on the fuel rods, which is the fuel, is the same zirconium that is used in the dirty 30s for camera flashes. And so they would have, you remember those big flashes, big stupid flashes, and they have a hammer on the outside, and the hammer comes up and smashes the glass, oxygen rushes in, and there's this big flash. And this is why you don't want to buy antiques. It's because most of your antiques from the 30s, 40s are coated with this stuff. That was a very popular thing back then. That was the original. It was the evilest thing you could do on top of that. And so when you put it on the fuel rod, it has the exact same attribute. It's no different. The minute it's exposed to oxygen, it detonates. It produces hydrogen. The hydrogen will detonate because zirconium cladding will catch fire. The fire will detonate the hydrogen. It's the meltdown, right? The zirconium cladding melting down is the meltdown itself because it ignites the fuel pellets, which are also covered in zirconium. And that will just boil off all the water in just moments in the entire pool, right? Because you're talking about 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. So the new agency was reporting that damaged fuel rods at a third reactor had been temporarily exposed. There's no such thing as a temporary exposed in that environment. There's no way to put water back in there. Once it's exposed, it catches fire. There's no way to put it out. It doesn't need oxygen to burn. It'll burn in the bottom of the ocean. It'll burn 2,000 miles down into the earth mantle once it's exposed to any oxygen. Seawater was being channeled into the reactor to cover the rocks, the rods. You can't put seawater channeling into a reactor. It doesn't work that way. What was the date on this story? Let me just put that picture right here so I can find my way back. Yeah, this is Matthew Wall, March the 13th. So reactor 3 and reactor 1 had already detonated. So there is no channeling anything in because the reactors detonated all over reactor 1, 2, 3, and 4 and the rest of the site. Like there's no walking around. That's a lethal dose everywhere you go. But the Pentagon officials reported Sunday that the helicopters are flying 60 miles from the plant, picked up small amounts of radioactive particulates still being analyzed, but presumed to include cesium and iodine-131, suggesting a wider environmental contamination. Now actually, we actually have that information here. Just give me a second. Let me see if I can. I know I can, but let me find that very quick for you. I was reading this stuff all day, and I couldn't comprehend why they hate us so much. I never can, really. I was supposed to do a different show tonight. There we go, I should find it. You just can't appreciate the evilness that this industry actually is. Here we go, the aerial survey. Drink. So this was an aerial survey, United States radiation survey conducted nearly 1,000 feet above the ground. This story was written in 2013, but it was in hindsight, right? It was millions of atoms per square meter. This is measured by a plane or a helicopter, I'm not sure, flying 1,000 feet above the area. Yeah, 1,000 feet above the ground. Been gathered jointly between April 2nd and the 3rd of 2011. 1,000 feet above the ground. With 3 million atoms per square meter, 20 kilometers away from the nuclear disease factory. By the way, which only has an 8-day half-life. So if they had done it right away, it would have been tens of millions of atoms of iodine-131. But it's hard to appreciate how they measured iodine-131 because the biggest byproduct of radiated fuel rod is the curium isotopes. And it's very energetic. It needs lead shielding 20 times thicker than plutonium, which you would assume would drown out the signal, right, of iodine-131. So instead of putting down zircon or curium-244, for instance, they put down iodine-131. But the reality of it was curium isotopes and plutonium that they were acknowledging. The impact of the continued venting of long-lasting radioactivity from the plant is hard to overstate. It's hard to comprehend. How can you vent 1,000 pounds per square inch? Right, there's a whole procedure. Now, it's not only 1,000 pounds per square inch at this point. This is 2 days later. Because there's no cooling, it needs 1 million gallons a minute to cool the reactor. You're looking at many thousands per pound per square inch. There's no way to cool that back down, even if you had the whole operation was intact. You still couldn't cool it down at that stage. It's a runaway, right? They don't want to give you that kind of information because you would lose faith in the nuclear industry right away, which is an appropriate thing to do. Japan's reactor operators now have little choice but to periodically release radioactive steam as part of an emergency cooling process. You can't release steam. You have to run away. Wait for it to detonate, which is what they've done. For the fuel of the Stricken reactor, they may continue for a year or more even after fission has stopped. Fission doesn't stop. That's why they want to put it in the ground for 1 million years. It doesn't stop. The plant's operator must constantly try to flood the reactors with seawater. You can't flood 3,000 pounds per square inch, which is multiple thousands over its limit. Containment. It's like if you keep putting pressure in your car tire, what happens? It blows up, right? Well, if you can't cool down the reactor, the pressure increases constantly. Guess what happens? It blows up. It suggests that tens of thousands of people who have been evacuated may not be able to return to their homes for a considerable period, and that shifts in the wind could blow radioactive material towards the Japanese cities rather than out to sea. Again, it's so... You're talking about Matthew Walsh, who we absolutely despise. More steam releases also mean the plume headed across the Pacific could continue to grow. So they're trying to say that the emissions in the radioactive fallout, this is what they were doing, right? They were framing a narrative, so anybody that's looking at this but wasn't astute on the nuclear ins and outs when they heard about radiation in their country, Canada, United States, would assume it was from the venting. And this was the framing that they were doing right here. On Sunday evening, the White House sought to tamp down concerns, saying that modeling done by the Non-Regulatory Commission had concluded that Hawaii, Alaska, U.S. territories, U.S. West Coast are not expected to experience any harmful levels of radioactivities. And nothing could be further from the truth, could it? Nothing could be further from the truth. And let's just say that was true, right? That it was only venting, even though clearly that's not true. This material is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. 2 billion times. So a single atom is much worse than that. It's equal to getting trillions. It's 1 trillion times worse than external doses because it's in your body, pulsing energy at the speed of light every second, smashing your DNA, blowing holes in your chromosomes, causing permanent lesions to your organs. And then your body's producing red blood cells, white blood cells every second, which displaces red blood cells to carry oxygen nutrition. It's producing a prolific amount of that has to attack the radiation and try to fix the damage every second and attack the source every second forever. It's like a bullet going off in your body every second. And then as you get more into your bioaccumulate, you get more into your body can't maintain that. That's called leukemia because you're producing more white blood cells than red blood cells. The essential problem is the definition of off in a nuclear reactor. When the nuclear chain reaction is stopped and the reactor shuts down, the fuel is still producing about 6% as much heat as it did when it was running, caused by continuing radioactivity, the release of the subatomic particles and of gamma rays, beta rays, neutron bombardments, and alpha shine. But on top of all that, you got X-rays. They omit so much that there's no way for the average person to equate the truth, right? To figure out the truth. Usually when a reactor is first shut down, an electric pump pulls heated water from the vessel to a heat exchanger, and the cool water from a river or ocean, 1 million gallons a minute per reactor, is brought in to draw off that heat. Right? So normally it's still producing 6%, but that's long after it had maintained a cold shutdown. That's long after you take it out and put it in the fuel pool. And it's in the fuel pool for decades, it's still producing 6% of the heat, as it would under 1,000 pounds per square inch and enormous temperatures, which is how they boil that water, right? For 1 million homes and businesses every minute. It's still producing the same atoms, though. And each fuel pool will boil off about 120,000 liters a day. Usually when a reactor is first shut down, an electric pump pulls the water in. Well, Fukushima had no power. So the pressure was building up. There was no way to vent it, and there's no way to put water into it. But the Japanese reactor, after losing electric power, that system could not be used. So there was no water circulating. Instead, the operators are dumping seawater into the vessel and letting it cool the fuel by boiling. It's simply not fucking true. And I apologize that I swore, but it's simply not true. It's such a dishonest statement. It's like you go buy a car and you say, "Can I see the motor?" And you say, well, yeah, of course you can, right? So they open up the hood, there's no motor there. And you're saying, well, there's no motor. And you say, but you don't need a motor. I'm a salesman, I know better. My brother-in-law's a mechanic. He says we don't need the motor. So you got that, you got cash there, right? So give me the cash and I'll give you the car. And you're like, but there's no motor. You say, like, hey, are you calling me a lawyer? Now come in the office and give me all that cash. And I'm going to give you a bill of sales for your automobile. You don't need an engine. You're not gonna go do that, right? Why are you letting journalists destroy every species in your future? Instead, the operators are dumping seawater into the vessel and letting it cool. It's simply not true. You had multiple detonations. Reactor 1 and Reactor 3 had already detonated. There's nobody there. But as it boils, pressure rises too high to pump in more water, and they have to vent the vessel into the atmosphere and feed it more water, a process known as feed and bleed. You can't feed and bleed. Matthew Walls. How are you going to feed and bleed 1,000 pounds or 3,000 pounds at this stage? You cannot keep up with all the lies they tell you. Japanese nuclear plant hit by fire in third explosion. Oh, joy. This is the 15th of March. Day 5. Radiation around the Fukushima Daiichi plant has reached a level damaging to health. Well, it reached that clearly on Saturday on day 1. Day 2. Or day 1. I'm sorry. Kyoto News Agency reported the radiation levels have become too high for staff to remain in the control rooms. Officials are now concerned about all six reactors and are considering using helicopters. Well, all 600 pilots died at Chernobyl. All 600. All 600 helicopter pilots died at Chernobyl. Try wrapping your mind around that statement. Within the first couple of weeks. Every one of them. The rods are still radioactive, potentially as hot and dangerous as the fuel rods in the reactor. We're talking about the fuel pools. The fuel pools are trying to drop cold water on a boiling rooftop storage pond for spent uranium fuel rods. That was symbiotic because the reactors clearly had detonated, and they even show you pictures and lost their inventories right away. They even show you pictures of reactor 4. Clearly there's no fuel pools. Early on Tuesday, the plant in the country Stricken northeast, which that's in the videos, we have the videos of them trying to drop the water on. Reactor 4 and Reactor 3. And Reactor 4 and Reactor 3. Oh, wait now, I got the picture of what it would have looked like at that point. Because this is the 15th, right? So Reactor 4 had detonated. Reactor 3 detonated on the 13th. Reactor 1 is detonated. Reactor 2 is detonated. And some of these reactors have detonated again by day 5 and 6. But the damage basically was done by the 15th. So we have the videos of them trying to drop water on that. But that was meant to pacify people worldwide to think that, okay, well, maybe they got it under control, right? Put out that seed of doubt. Taiwan had 2,000 students, nuclear students from the universities, nuclear universities, previous students, alumni, academics, and professors spammed Twitter, spammed YouTube, spammed Facebook with stories that it was like a banana and potato chip, got into fights in all the conversations, made a mockery of it so people didn't even want to watch the videos. They done that for almost 2 years. We covered a story last week of a girl, Kayleen Cunningham, who was a student in university, Cambridge, MIT Cambridge, and she was out singing making short TikTok videos saying that radiation fallout was like a banana and like walking in sunshine and everything else. Here was a student that was still in school, a current student, in order to get her grades up, was out lying to the population with multi-million of views on a video. And, you can't help but wonder how evil are these people. You have no idea. They're the most evil section of creatures on this planet is the pro-nuclear community, particularly professors, particularly nuclear scientists. That was followed by a fire that broke out at the number 4 unit. Let me show you that picture. There are now concerns about the storage ponds of reactor 5 and 6. Well, we have redacted pictures of reactor 6 because they were separate from reactor 1, 2, 3, and 4. My apologies, a little bit dry. 5 and 6 was north of reactor 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we have redacted pictures from the drones. When you zoom in, reactor 6 is completely pixelated out. So is the common spin fuel pool, by the way. And so was another site west of the site, on the actual site itself, was pixelated out. Reactor number 4 was shut down for maintenance before the earthquake, but its spent fuel rods are stored in the pool at the site. So instead of a pool at the building, there's a pool at the site, suggesting it wasn't even in the building. The reality of it is the fuel pools are in the building or at the top of the buildings. And to your right, you're seeing the mainstream, just a fraction of them, pretending they're 140 feet above the stump to your left. And that's their name, CBS Seth Dorn, which is the senator's son. BBC Rupert Winfield Hayes, your top right-hand corner. CNN, of course, the degenerates of degenerates. ABC, which is the biggest media in Australia, Cecilia Vega. Shouldn't they be held accountable? Shouldn't they be in jail for the rest of their lives? Shouldn't they actually get the death penalty for what they're doing, claiming they're in a building that don't exist so you and your children can't have a future? They're each making about $1 million a year now. We've been following them for... I made that picture, by the way, over a decade ago. Reactor number 4 was shut down for maintenance before the earthquake, but the spent fuel rods are stored in the pool at the site. Again, see, at the site. The fire on Tuesday was extinguished. Talking about reactor 4. So again, they say the site instead of the building, right? That's reactor 4 over there. There was that's a 19-story, 190-foot, 65-meter building. There was nothing intact in that building, period. The fuel pools and reactor cores clearly were gone. They knew that, and that picture was available at that time. They even showed it earlier, right? But Kyoto reported that the pool was subsequently boiling with the water levels falling. Well, no, the building had already detonated. That's what caused the explosion. The water was already gone. The fuel caught fire. That caused the explosion you see to your left and to your right, reactor 3. If the water balls off, there's a risk the fuel could catch fire. I mean, these people are insane monsters, aren't they? Sending a plume of radiation directly into the atmosphere. Well, like they pretend they were in the building because the plume of radiation covered the whole planet in less than 20 days. But that's just a single isotope they're acknowledging, plutonium-239. And it's based upon venting when clearly there was no venting. Right? Once reactor 1 detonated, there's no going back. It's a lethal dose everywhere. Radiation levels at one location at the site reached 400 millisieverts, 400,000 microsieverts, an hour after the fire. And you love this one, 4 times the level that can lead to cancer. Idano, the chief cabinet secretary, said 4 times the level that can lead to cancer. First off, at one location at the site. Listen, once these buildings detonate, you're talking about millions of sieverts in front of reactor 1. Acknowledged. We got that actually in documentation. 3 sieverts is a lethal dose. 1 million sieverts, I don't know how to explain it to you. I really don't. Because 3, not 3 million, but 3 is a lethal dose. What do you guess 1 million sieverts is going to do to somebody? There's 1,000 millisieverts in a sievert. So to suggest that it was 400 millisieverts is a brutal dose, don't get me wrong. But to suggest that was the highest dose at the site, I think whoever wrote the story should be dropped out of a plane on top of reactor 3. I'm not kidding you either, by the way. Cancer. Your organs will melt right away. After Hiroshima and Nagasaki, people exposed to these radiation levels were found squatted down with their pants dropped, excreting their organs because they were melting. That's how they died. Some of them were found actually in that position, squatted down, like they were taken using the washroom. Once this happened on Saturday. Once you have a detonation of a nuclear reactor / fuel pools, there's just multiple sieverts everywhere you touch. Like those tall, skinny stacks were 25 sieverts at the base. 3 sieverts is a lethal dose. But just the original venting that went up that caused enormous, still today, is lethal doses by those stacks. The levels have lowered dramatically by the end of the day, according to the endless, perpetual, degenerate International Atomic Energy Agency. The relentless, degenerate International Atomic Energy. They're perpetual degenerates, eh? Clearly, nothing got out of that building. According to the International Atomic Energy Agency, nothing got out. On August 24, 2023, they came out and said that didn't even happen. According to the experts, engineers are now locked in a desperate fight to prevent all 3 reactors overheating. Well, all 3 of them are just detonated. They're completely gone. The risk appears highest at reactor 2, which is the only building that seemed to be intact, even though we know it's not. It burnt constantly for days. If they were being cross-examined and you were to kick them in the mouth every time they lied, they wouldn't have a tooth left in their head after the first sentence. By the way, that's reactor 2. So they direct your attention to reactor 2 because when you look it up, that's what you see. But they don't want you to look at reactor 3 or reactor 4, for instance. The Director General, who thank goodness died of a horrible death, told a press conference there was a possibility of core damage to number 2 reactor, adding, the damage is estimated to be less than 5%. And the reality of it was, reactor 2 went China syndrome, deep into the earth. The fuel pools and the reactor cores burned constantly for days. But apparently it immediately went like hot butter at 9,000 degrees Fahrenheit temperatures down into the earth. And that's why that building managed to stay intact. Whereas that detonation of reactor 4 was so intense. I can no longer contain my contempt for these people. I don't think I should have to. The government ordered any victims remaining within the 12 mile to leave immediately and told those between 12 and 19 miles to stay indoors in a nuclear wasteland with massive plumes coming through. The coward of cowards. There's no other way to describe these people as only cowards of cowards. While imposing a 19-mile no-fly zone, experts backed their assessment that the health risks beyond the area were minimal at present. Health risk experts. These are people that you should fine today and put in jail forever, if not the death penalty. For those in evacuation areas, close your windows and doors and switch off your air conditioner. These people are the worst humans we've ever created by far. If you're being evacuated, cover yourself as much as possible and wear a face mask. Like, first off, the particles we're talking about are 600 times smaller than the face mask is meant to keep out. Stay calm. No, you're supposed to panic. This is why you have 100 to 150 massive sirens around a typical nuclear power plant in North America, so you can panic. But they co-opted that now, and if you do have an event, there's no way they're going to use the sirens. And if you do, they'll say it was an accident. Since Friday, she's been cut off from television. So he wants a bit of drama. By the way, James Lucid donated $300 the weekend, which I had to go out and pick up a whole bunch of stuff, lots of oils. I even picked up 2 bottles of magic oil. I got everything was on sale. I got a $30 pack of stainless steel washers, because I'm basically running out of them for $17. That was a great deal. And I got a whole bunch of other parts. That made me very happy to get my hands on that stuff, trust me. And then I filled up the truck, topped up the truck, and we'll survive another week. It's crazy. It's crazy what we're trying to do. We're trying to do the moral and ethical thing. And you just got to be committed to it 100%, right? Which also reminds me... you might hear some noise there, bear with me. I posted a short video tonight. I want people to... Should Italy have a nuclear power? I'm hoping that people will go there and give me a thumbs up on that video. It's in my short section. Go to my homepage, click on shorts, and it's the first video. Italy took down my Facebook page. I didn't have a single thing on my Facebook page, by the way, about Italy. I explained that at the beginning of the show. We're going to do a whole show dedicated to those figures this week. I just want to remind people to try to pump that out there so Italy can hopefully fight back against this disgusting nuclear industry. Since Friday, she's been cut off from television. She said, when I turned it on, I heard about the radiation. It's terrifying. I'm afraid now to drink the water from the mountains in case it is contaminated. Of course, these plumes are very heavy. They come and hit the mountains. You lose a huge amount of their payloads. And then that washes down to their aquifers. So it's 100% correct in her thinking. Readings in parts of the facility hit levels indicating an immediate risk of damage to people without protective gear. Idano said, what a disgusting monster this guy is. What a despicable monster. What a revolting parasite. Can I possibly tell you how disgusted I am with these monsters? The number 2 reactor was not as stable as the others, but the water injection was working to a certain level, he added. There is no water injection into a high 1,000 pounds per square inch reactor that is at that point 2,500, 3,000 pounds per square inch because there's no cooling. The reactor 2, of course, was the only reactor left at this point that didn't detonate in a row of 4. Reactor 1, 2, and 3, or 1, 3, and 4 had catastrophically detonated and lost their entire inventories. TEPCO admitted for the first time there was a possibility of a partial meltdown. Why is TEPCO even in this conversation? So you don't blame the nuclear industry, right? In Tokyo, the metropolitan government said radiation reached around 20 times normal levels in the capital on Tuesday morning, but said the governor said the levels would not immediately... Well, this kind of radiation, typically, if you're far away from it, doesn't immediately, and you're talking 270 kilometers away, it's not going to immediately cause health problems. But, I mean, there's 865,000 extra cancers in the first year. And in the scope of radiation fallout, that's immediate. Let me bring that up for you. By the way, the air samples in Tokyo were 270 times more contaminated, and they're only acknowledging gamma, cesium-137, the global weapons fallout peak. These are absurd numbers, by the way. And in the first year, they stopped releasing these statistics after that year. The National Cancer Center said the number of cancer patients, rose by 865,000 in 2012, a year after Fukushima. But cancer is just one of the many illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries that'll manifest. There's heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline. The list is very long. Would not immediately cause health problems. In other words, get sick and die later, blame it on something else. Really, these are the most worthless humans we've ever come across. Professor David Hinde. We had a lot of rain last week. Holy shit. My goodness. Had massive rain one day, then there's no rain the next day. Sunshine, warmed up. Next day, massive rain, nice and warm. It's crazy. In the middle of winter. Then another day, of sunshine. The next day, massive rain. There's no ice left, let alone snow. It's unbelievable. I never conceived that could happen in the middle of winter. My mind is absolutely blown that could happen. We were geared up to go out and do research expeditions in the snow because you can find the tracks in the snow. We don't have any ice or snow. I know we're supposed to get snow next week and the week after, but I don't know if we'll get enough. I just never conceived that this could happen. And so, there's nothing I can do about it. I can't, the whole province, I spent the day looking across the province on the weather network to see if there's any snow coming for anywhere, and I can't find any snow anywhere. Everybody got the same thing, right? The other side of the island had 10, 12 inches. But I got to drive 750 miles or something to get there. That's just not simply going to happen, right? And I don't think there's enough there. I'm having a problem with my glasses here. Every once in a while, you got to give them a really good cleaning. I haven't done that. So the nuclear industry has spent enormous amounts of money covering this up. It has silenced any dissenting voices. It has a practical unlimited budget to attack you with. And I just don't have patience for not trying. I got to try. I don't know how not to try. And I know some people do, but not very many people realizes what it takes to do what I'm doing. To commit yourself to something that the world has no concept of, but is the most important topic in human history. I have to go ahead and get some kind of I don't like using like house cleaners. I don't like using chemicals, particularly anything that's going to be on me or my face. And I got some clean cloths there. That one's pretty old, actually. Let me grab a clean cloth. It'll take me a minute. It'll take me a moment. Get my big head out of the way. Professor David Hinde, the head of the Department of Nuclear Physics at Australian National University, said it was the worst nuclear accident since the Chernobyl, and stressed it was on a far smaller scale. What a disgusting parasite. You can expect that from a professor, right, every single time. Just bear with me. I'll be right back. Yippee-ki-yay. Here we go. Let me bring me back in there. An expert told a broadcaster at NHK, which is a major media in Nipperhead land, that the situation was very grave warning, and that without protective gear at levels of 100 millisieverts, could be enough to cause male infertility in a short time. It gets crazier. He also said that those in the 12 to 19 mile zone should dust off their hair and clothing before entering their homes and buildings. Like, yes, like dusting it off is an option. It's something. But you should throw your clothing away and shave your head right away and your eyebrows. Get in the shower for 6 hours. You can come out and take little breaks, but any towels or face cloths you use, throw them away. And then your shower's going to be contaminated forever. And your pipes. There's no redeeming quality to the nuclear industry. Not one. Not a single friggin' one. Including brushing off the soles of their shoes. You got to throw away your clothing. Throw away your shoes. Throw away. You got to shave your head. You got to shave your friggin' eyebrows. That's the minimum thing you should be doing in that environment. I'm going to fall out anyway. Once inside, they should close the windows, turn off the air conditionings, and any laundry hanging out should be left outside. Once inside, close the windows. Like when they tell you to close your windows and turn off your air conditioning, you need to get out of Dodge. You need to get out of Dodge. You don't stay there. You do not stay. Don't trust these disgusting maggots for a split second. Japan's central bank pumped billions of more dollars into the economy as the stocks plunged more than 10% on the back of the news following a major injection on Monday. Japan Fukushima 50 heralds who volunteered to stay behind at the Japan's Crippled. This is March 16th when all 4 reactors are already detonated and all the fuel pools had already burnt off. And they're calling it Crippled. I like to cripple anybody that used that language back then. The scum of the earth. A daughter tweeted that her father had volunteered, and I'm really proud of him for sacrificing himself for the nuclear industry. Once there's a meltdown, you can't do anything. They stayed behind while everyone else was sent nearly 15 miles away. There is no 15 miles away safety zone. And radiation soared to menacing levels. These were lethal levels everywhere. They didn't go in there because we got all the documentation. And there's no proof that anybody was there because they would have dropped dead. There are 200 of them. They work in shifts of 50, earning the inaccurate nickname of the Fukushima 50, which was a fable dreamt up, right, to invoke compassion for the victims. But it was meant to lull you into complacency. See? Think about this over here, but don't think about what has been going on. At one point, even when these men were pulled back 500 yards from the deteriorating nuclear plant, this is March the 16th. This is not deteriorating. It's nuclear meltdowns, right? They deserve prominence. A 27-year-old woman whose Twitter name tweeted earlier that this week her father had volunteered for Fukushima duty. Even though he will be retiring in just a year and a half, my eyes are filled up with tears. Japan Prime Minister told the volunteers, "You're the only ones who can resolve a crisis. Retreat is unthinkable." These weren't volunteers. They were ordered back in. Right, they were ordered back in. Just hang on one second there. I got a problem in paradise. Hang on, I'm almost finished. I don't know. There we go. Hopefully that works. I have to deal with it after, I guess. Oh, that's the problem. That's the way it goes. Here we go. I'm so upset with these people. I was reading this stuff today and I was like, my goodness. Is there any end to the evilness this industry is capable of? And an admirer of the Fukushima crew tweeted, "Whatever the closest international equivalent to the Medal of Honor and Nobel Peace Prize, the Fukushima 50 deserve more." Listen, you can't go into a nuclear meltdown without dying. It was all hokey pokey. Radiation is leaking. Every time I hear that word, I'm not very impressed. Rain may be carrying it down upon them, and a toxic fire burns likely spewing more radiation into the atmosphere. This is on the 16th of March, by the way. There's little information about who actually stayed behind. The skeleton crew is likely made up not of managers, but of technicians. Men who have the schematics of the plant in their heads and can fix pipes and unclog vents. You can unclog a vent after a nuclear meltdown. Did I mention reactor 3 detonated right alongside of all the other reactors, the plutonium mixed oxide reactor? No one's unclogging pipes. No one's crawling around. This is not an industrial accident. It's a nuclear meltdown. And the differences are quite stark, quite lethal. They're gone into battle. No, you can't go to battle against a nuclear meltdown. It doesn't work that way. Crawling at times through dark mazes is simply not true. Armed with flashlights and radiation detectors is simply not true. You can't go into a nuclear meltdown. Wearing full body hazmat suits. These are garbage. The suit needs to be 6 feet thick lead in order to protect them in that environment. Right. So the idea is to get you to pray for these people that don't even exist, so that you don't appreciate that this has happened. Nuclear scare grows with an orange flash and a violent blast. The 15th of March, day 5. She's beginning a fresh explosion which damaged the roof above its overheating reactor 2 and left steam rising from the complex. Like telling a lie is one thing, but committing genocide and omnicide against a planet, I think, is a totally different other thing. That's what they're doing. Like, we got so many people on the planet, we would have come up with some kinds of solutions, believe it or not. You couldn't stop what's happening, but you could have mitigated lots of things. People could have got out of harm's way, and people didn't need to be left in a nuclear wasteland. This is what the industry done. And he quantified doing that by these stories, by all these lies and propaganda that they produced originally. Early reports suggest there might have been some damage to the containment vessel after the pressure dropped. And the blast was caused by a buildup of hydrogen. Blasts are caused by the nuclear meltdown. It produces the hydrogen. When the superheated steam in the core reacted with the zirconium-alloyed cladding that surrounds the reactor fuel rods, the reaction is the zirconium cladding, first off, it melts. It catches fire rather immediately. Because I've already explained that multiple times, and I'm not going to do it again. A similar explosion blew the top off the Reactor 1 building on Saturday morning. It didn't blow the top off the building. It ejected the fuel pool. It ignited and burnt off the fuel pool, the two of them at the top of the buildings, with decades of reactor cores. And the explosion was catastrophic, and I already showed you those pictures. There you go, I got it again. Reactor 1 we're talking about, so it'll be the one on your left. Coming up. And official at the Japanese Nuclear Industrial Safety Agency, NISA, said it was impossible to say whether or not there has been damage. But any academic on the planet, when they looked at Reactor 1 or looked at Reactor 3, knew the fuel pools and the reactor cores were gone. There's not a single one, and particularly Reactor 3, the fuel pool and reactor core were ejected right out of the buildings. And so every academic on the planet knew that, and everybody that's making the statements, the official statements, knew that they were gone. And they're still in power. An official of the Japanese Nuclear Industrial Safety Agency is impossible to say whether there has or not been. They're the experts. If the experts look at that and don't know the fuel pools and reactor cores are falling back down to Earth right away, who does? Who would? Who could? If not the experts, right? So they choose to cut your throat rather than do the moral and ethical thing and acknowledge what's happening. At one point on Sunday, emergency cooling at 2 reactors was suspended because the pools of seawater were being pumped in ran dry. So this is grammar is a very nasty stuff sometimes for manipulation, right? So when you try to make sense of what they just said there, nothing makes sense unless you say that the fuel pools ran dry, because that's the only reason you would use the word ran dry, because the water that was being pumped in came from the ocean. That's not going to run dry. And you couldn't pump seawater into the fuel pools anyway because you had lethal doses everywhere. So this was, again, right, to show you the explosion and say nothing happened. Later in the day, a backup pump to a 3rd reactor ran out of fuel there was no backup pump to a third reactor. These are meltdowns. Causing water levels to fall so low the fuel rods were fully exposed. If fuel rods are exposed to oxygen, they'll detonate right away. Immediately. Instantaneously. And catastrophically. It's a nuclear meltdown, right? Officials at TEPCO said they believed all 3 nuclear reactors are likely to have suffered partial meltdown. Everybody at TEPCO at that time should be lined up and shot. Though this could mean just one fuel rod or nearly all of them melting within the core. I mean, how sadistic have you got to be to suggest this could mean just one fuel rod? How sadistic you got to be to say something like that when this picture was circulating? Because that's what they do. They can't open their friggin' pie holes without lying. Water has to cover completely the fuel rods, the radioactive fuel rods in the nuclear cores to prevent overheating or the fuel pool. On Monday afternoon, water levels dropped substantially in all 3 reactors and at one point fully exposed the fuel rods in reactor 2. So it's a meltdown. You can't fully expose the fuel rod for a split second. It'll melt down right away. But the lies are really something, isn't it? I kind of, because I've been doing this for so long, I can't handle the lies sometimes, right? It really gets to me. I just can't handle the lying. Speaking about the situation in Reactor 2, the Chief Cabinet Secretary, degenerate scumbag Idano, said the pump ran out of fuel and the process of inserting water took longer than expected, so the fuel rods were exposed from the water for a while. In other words, they melted down. You couldn't insert water into a pressurized building, okay? And it's not just a pressurized building like 30 pounds per square inch. It's 1,000 pounds per square inch. So, like, how do I put it? Think of winds at 400 miles per hour, and you're going to try to, you got a big hole there, and the winds are, the wind coming out of there is lethal wind coming out of there at 400 miles per hour, and you got a bucket, and your job is to throw water in that hole where the wind is coming out at 400 miles per hour. How do you think that's going to work? How long before you're going to give up? Now imagine that the stuff coming out of there is a lethal dose, melt your organs immediately. Right? In order to get water in there, you have to let pressure out. That's what I'm telling you. The fuel rods will already have lost around 90% of their heat, and without further setbacks, the reactors could be cold and rendered safe within a week to 10 days. The fuel rods had already lost 90% of their heat. No. Right? You had a station blackout, and so you had no way of withdrawing the heat, so everything boiled. It's a pressure cooker at 1,000 pounds per square inch instead of 120 pounds per square inch. It's a pressure cooker with no way to draw the heat away. So it didn't lose its energy, see? But like, it's crazy because every sentence or every paragraph is a perpetual lie. Every sentence and every paragraph. And if you try to challenge every paragraph and every lie in a single story, it's an absurd amount of time. If I try to bring in evidence to help you appreciate, it takes even more time. But engineers at the power plant face a delicate balancing act because seawater being pumped into the reactor is boiling immediately into steam, which raises the pressure inside. It has to be vented off before more water can be pumped in. And doing so releases a small amount of radioactive material into the air. Like, it should be totally legal in the criminal justice system to hunt these people down and execute them on the spot. NISA, which is the nuclear industry in Japan, has already confirmed that the cesium, which is a British word, why would the Japanese be using a British terminology? And iodine-131 have been released into the atmosphere. And the substances are produced in the core and can contain contaminate cooling water if the rods get hot enough to melt the cladding that surrounds them. So if the cladding melts, then that ignites the fuel pellets. It's a total misrepresentation of what's really going on, is what I'm trying to explain to you. Monitoring posts to the northwest of the power station recorded radiation levels of 680 microsieverts per hour on Monday. Not even a millisievert, but microsieverts. Not even 3/4 of a millisievert, but the disrespect in that statement is really special. Reactors already are detonated. A dose roughly equivalent to 4 months of natural background radiation. See, I can't contain my contempt. I just can't contain my contempt sometimes. I don't know why I should have to, because people won't stay here and listen to me, but this is the 15th of March. All the reactors have already detonated. And he showed you a picture from a few days earlier. An American warship, the USS Ronald Reagan, detected low levels of radiation, really, at a distance of 100 miles. First off, they were within 1 kilometer of the nuclear meltdowns. That 14 jet engines on the helicopters had to be replaced because of radioactive. That the entire crew watches stopped working at the same time, the digital watches. Imagine how radioactive that was. And that the bathrooms were blocked up with people with diarrhea from radiation poisoning. It was absurd how many people got sick. All their lawsuits were dismissed, saying that there was no way they could have got any radiation from being right alongside of multiple nuclear meltdowns. Those caught in an evacuation zone around Fukushima were given potassium iodine pills to protect their thyroid glands, which, as far as I can tell, is simply not true. They were given it, and it's simply not true that potassium iodate is going to keep cesium and other gamma emitters out of their thyroids. And whatever they manage to keep out of their thyroid, by the way, just sequesters in their pituitary and their adrenaline glands and everywhere else. It's not just gammas, right? Just perpetual lies. There's really something though in it. Radioactive iodine is easily absorbed by the thyroid and can cause tumors. Well, every child on this planet, and every insect, bird, mammal, animal on this planet has so much anthropogenic man-made thyroid in their glands that they're producing radioactive hormones for the rest of their short lives. And this is why we're not seeing the reproduction of the species anymore. This is why we're looking at an extinction event. Hence the reason we have that particular poll tonight. Has Fukushima's brutal radioactive fallout compromised the future of humans and all species worldwide? Reactor 1 and 2 operated with uranium fuel rods, but Reactor 3 used the mixed oxide fuel rods, known as MOX fuel, supposed to be capital letters. And it's also known as plutonium mixed oxide fuel, which is reclaimed uranium, reclaimed plutonium. So the original emissions from a nuclear fuel pool worldwide, 1,000 of them worldwide, is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. That's why they're surrounded by farms, so they can make you sick for the rest of your life at the supermarkets. It's a highly, which claims plutonium, but it's a different type of plutonium. We're talking about different energetics. Like the concoctions that are coming out of plutonium mixed oxide fuel, we know personally, right, there's very little literature about it out there, but there is connotations. And they suggest there's a lot of different isotopes that are infinitely worse than plutonium or americium or neptunium or curium. And that's a horrifying thought. And then they even say, can linger in the environment for thousands of years. Plutonium-239 is total of 240,000. There's 10 half-lives, by the way. So here's what they say. They say the half-life is 24,000 years. They don't tell you there's 10 half-lives. Meaning half the radioactivity is dropped, meaning it takes that long to drop its radioactivity to half. But there's 10 half-lives. And who's going to be around 24,000 years to suggest that this is the half-life? There's 10 half-lives. The issue would come if there is a continued problem to cool down the fuel rods, said Paddy Regan, a nuclear physicist at Surrey University. So on the 15th, you had all those explosions. You had these pictures out of melted reactors. So that professor clearly, like the rest of them, clearly knew they were gone and was quoted because he was willing to cut everybody's throat worldwide so he can molest that student, I guess. Director General International Atomic Energy Agency, thank goodness he's dead, said it was unlikely the accident would develop like Chernobyl. But this was at least equal to 3,600 Chernobyls. Each of these reactors, not counting the fuel pools at the top of the buildings, each of the reactors were equal to 100 Chernobyls, because Chernobyl was a new reactor. These were plutonium mixed oxide reactors. Chernobyl was a graphite reactor. It's totally different. The inventories were much larger and much more volatile. At the top of each of the buildings, was around 8 reactor cores and the fuel pools, and they're gone at each of the buildings. All right. I smurfed this up. Just give me 1 second. La 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 la. Here we go. Okay, so that's what we got for you today. So all of us that contribute to what we're doing here have made an incredible sacrifice for this planet, and that we're doing the best we can with the little things that we got. And we're not going to apologize to anybody because we're doing the best we can, and we've been at it for a very long time, and we're sincere and genuine, and we put everybody else's lives ahead of our own. We put all the species on a pedestal where they deserve to be, and I don't regret a single thing I've done for this industry, or for the anti-nuclear movement, for this industry, for the anti-nuclear movement. Nuclear is your enemy, period. There's no perhapsing about that, no maybes. It's a terrible, horrifying, horrific, gutless, spineless, soulless, creepy nuclear industry. It's a genocide machine. It's a genocide machine that hates you and the 8 million species and is working diligently to exterminate you and the 8 million species. It spends every waking moment manipulating, deceiving, and brainwashing the most vulnerable of society. And it doesn't have a single person in the industry with integrity. Not a single person exists. It's an industry of cowards. And in all the years that I've been putting my phone number on the screen at the beginning of each show, we've never had a nuclear expert call into the show and try to correct me. How interesting, eh? See what James Lewis has got quite a few got absurd amount of anti-nuclear music. And I'm kind of fascinated by this new one he got out, Nuclear Game Theory. I was going to play Nuclear Italiano, which is a wonderful song. You should hear it. I played it a bit at the beginning of the show. But I need to save that song for a little day or two because I'm going to do a show on Italy after taking down my Facebook page. We're going to play this song, Nuclear Game Theory. And James' ability now, he's jumping into kind of film. Well, he's doing a lot of filmmaking anyway, right? All of this is footage he's creating with AI. But he's jumping. He's experimenting quite a bit now. And the stuff he's coming up with is amazing. And so this is kind of like a heavy metal, I might be wrong on the genre, type of a heavy metal song. But it's meant to tell a story, and it's meant, all of his music has all these different genres. It's pretty incredible what he's able to do. And as far as I can tell you, like, he's far from slowing down. He must be at about 270 songs right now, anti-nuclear songs, which is more than the entire planet combined has produced. So we're going to play that song. I'll come back over and close the poll down. I'll come back and close the poll down after the song. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up or like. We got brutalized on our last video again, as usual. And I'm going to disappear. We'll see everybody on the next show. Have a great night. Hugs for everybody. Have a great day tomorrow. I'll see you on the next one.
NATO expands, the buffer erased. Missiles on borders, no time to delay. The silos armed, the warheads are primed. One wrong signal, then end of the line. Too close to react, too late. Too big to ignore, won't stop. Too fast to detect, too far. Too hard to restore, no way. The number's alive, the launch is awake. Try to recall it, but the strike's underway. Washington scripts it, Moscow reacts. Game moves in real time, no turning it back. The framework collapsed, the fail-safes are shot. Launch orders issued, the clock's running hot. They call this defense, they call this a plan. But first strikes don't wait, they just follow command. Nobody blinks when they lock the exchange. The moment is set, no mercy, no change. No exits remain. Targets acquired, fail-safe is gone. The fire, the strike, the treaties dissolve. The next move is made, but the board won't evolve. NATO moves east, the red line is breached. Called it New World Order when it's the old